147 people boarded a cruise ship in Argentina. They were retirees, nature lovers, bird watchers, people who had saved up for the trip of a lifetime. A voyage across the southern Atlantic Ocean, through some of the most remote waters on Earth. Nobody expected to come home in a body bag. 3 of them did. And right now, as you watch this video, the ship is still at sea. The passengers are still on board. And health officials in more than a dozen countries are racing to track down everyone who left that ship before they knew what was spreading inside it. This is the story of the MV Hondius, and it is still happening. To understand what happened on the MV Hondius, you have to go back to before the ship even left port. The year is 2025. A Dutchman, a bird watcher, a nature enthusiast, begins a 4-month road trip through South America. He travels through Chile, Uruguay, Argentina. He visits remote wilderness areas. He goes to places most tourists never see. He walks through tall grass and forests, chasing rare birds in the wild landscapes of Patagonia and the Argentine wilderness. He has no idea what is living in that grass. Hantavirus is carried by rodents, not just any rodents, specific species of wild mice, whose urine, saliva, and droppings carry a virus that can destroy the human respiratory system within days of exposure. You don't have to touch the mouse. You don't have to be bitten. You breathe in particles in the air near contaminated soil or vegetation, and the virus is inside you. Invisible, silent, already starting its work. The Dutchman finishes his road trip. He returns to Argentina only 4 days before his cruise ship departs. On April 1st, 2026, he boards the MV Hondius in Ushuaia, Argentina. He feels fine. Hantavirus incubates for 1 to 6 weeks before symptoms appear. He has no idea he is already infected. The ship casts off, 147 people, sailing into the South Atlantic. By April 6th, the Dutchman begins feeling unwell. Fever, headache, abdominal pain, diarrhea. He sees the ship's doctor. The doctor runs tests. An extensive respiratory panel comes back. Negative. Not COVID, not flu, not any of the usual suspects. The illness progresses. By April 11th, 10 days into the voyage, the Dutchman is dead. He is 70 years old. He dies on the ship. His body remains on board. The ship keeps sailing, and no one yet understands what has just begun. When the first passenger died, the ship's medical team was deeply concerned, but they did not yet know what they were dealing with. The tests had all come back wrong. The standard panel showed nothing. The cause of death was unclear. The MV Hondius continued its voyage, stopping at remote islands in the South Atlantic. Islands so isolated that most people have never heard of them. Tristan da Cunha, St. Helena, Ascension Island, and at each stop, some passengers got off. This is the detail that haunts investigators, because nobody knew yet. Nobody knew that a virus was moving through that ship. Nobody knew that passengers who felt fine might have already been exposed. On April 24th, the ship docked at St. Helena. 30 passengers disembarked. They scattered. Some caught flights home. Some explored the island. Some were already beginning to feel unwell. Among them was a Dutch woman, the wife of the man who had died on April 11th. She was a close contact. She had been near her husband during his illness. She had the virus. She went ashore at St. Helena on April 24th with gastrointestinal symptoms. She boarded a flight to Johannesburg on April 25th. She deteriorated during the flight. She arrived at the emergency department in Johannesburg on April 26th. She was dead. On board the same flight to Johannesburg were other passengers, people who had no idea what had just died next to them. Contact tracing for that flight has now been initiated across multiple countries. Back on the ship, a third case emerged on April 24th. A man presented to the ship's doctor with fever, shortness of breath, and the beginning of pneumonia. By April 26th, his condition had worsened critically. He was medically evacuated from Ascension Island to South Africa. On April 27th, where he is currently hospitalized in intensive care. A fourth passenger, an adult woman, developed fever on April 28th. By May 2nd, she was dead. 4 cases, 3 dead, and the ship is still at sea, still carrying passengers, still moving through international waters. On May 2nd, 2026, the World Health Organization receives notification from the United Kingdom of a cluster of severe respiratory illness aboard a Dutch-flagged cruise ship. The world is about to find out. Here's what makes the MV Hondius outbreak different from almost any hantavirus outbreak before it. Hantavirus does not normally spread between people. In almost every recorded case in history, the virus moves from rodent to human and stops there. You catch it from the mouse. The person next to you does not catch it from you. Almost every recorded case. The exception is the Andes virus. Andes virus is a specific strain of hantavirus, found primarily in South America, particularly in Argentina and Chile. It is the only hantavirus in the world known to spread from human to human. The mechanism is not fully understood. Scientists believe it can be transmitted through close contact with an infected person, through saliva, through secretions, possibly through respiratory droplets. What scientists do not know is how easily it spreads, or under what conditions, or how many people in close proximity might be exposed before transmission stops. The MV Hondius was a closed environment. 147 people, sleeping in cabins, eating in shared dining rooms, breathing recycled air in enclosed spaces, sitting next to each other on excursions. And at the center of all of it, a man who had spent 4 months walking through the wilderness of South America, who had breathed in something that should never have left those fields. Testing confirmed it. The virus on board the MV Hondius is the Andes virus. By May 4th, 2 cases are laboratory confirmed. 5 more are suspected. 3 people are dead. 1 is critically ill in intensive care. And 30 passengers have already left the ship and scattered across the world. The WHO issues a statement. The risk to the global population is assessed as low. But the word being used in public health circles to describe the situation is not low. The word is unprecedented. A hantavirus cluster on a ship, cases in 5 countries. Passengers in 6 US states being monitored. A flight attendant in Amsterdam hospitalized. 2 Singaporeans in isolation. 3 Canadians self-isolating. 8 French nationals who were on the same flight. As a confirmed case now being tested. And the ship, still at sea. Still carrying its passengers. Still heading slowly toward the Canary Islands. When it became known what was aboard the MV Hondius, ports did not want it. This is the part of the story that feels like something out of a film. A ship carrying confirmed cases of a deadly virus, trying to find somewhere to dock, while governments debated whether to let it in. The Canary Islands president objected. The residents of Tenerife were frightened. They had seen what happened in the early days of COVID, when cruise ships became floating vectors, spreading illness from port to port across the world. They did not want the Hondius at their dock. Spain's Central Health Agency overruled the objection. The ship was permitted to dock in Tenerife, with conditions, with health protocols, with medical teams waiting on the pier, but the image of a ship that no port wanted, carrying people who could not go home, traveling through international waters, with a dead body still on board. That image spread faster than the virus itself. Meanwhile, in the United States, something else was quietly making the situation worse. In January 2025, the US had withdrawn from the World Health Organization. In practical terms, this meant something specific and deeply troubling. During this outbreak, the CDC was no longer being automatically notified of WHO updates on emerging health threats. A former CDC director told the New York Times that this withdrawal made both the United States and the world less safe. The research that might have helped most, a pilot project studying how the Andes virus passes from rodents to humans, had been canceled in 2025 when the NIH eliminated its funding. The Centers for Research in Emerging Infectious Diseases, designed specifically to study viruses that could jump from animals to people, defunded, shut down before this outbreak began. Now, as cases emerged and spread, and health officials scrambled to understand a virus, they had limited research on. The absence of that work was being felt. The ship arrived in Tenerife. The remaining passengers, those with no symptoms, were tested, monitored, evaluated. For some of them, it was the first real information they had received about what had been happening around them. For the past several weeks, some had not known the man who died in April had died from a virus. Some had not been told what they might have been exposed to. They had been on a ship in the South Atlantic, eating in the same dining room, breathing the same air. For weeks, and they were only now learning what that meant. This is the part of the story that keeps epidemiologists awake. Not the people still on the ship, the people who already got off by the time the WHO was notified on May 2nd, and by the time laboratory testing confirmed the Andes virus on May 4th. 30 passengers had already disembarked at St. Helena on April 24th. That is 11 days. 11 days during which people who had been on a ship with confirmed hantavirus cases boarded commercial flights, passed through international airports, sat next to strangers in economy class, returned to their homes, in their cities, in their countries, in their ordinary lives. Health officials in at least 12 countries began the urgent work of finding them. In the United States, 6 states reported passengers who had returned: California, Arizona, Texas, New Jersey, Georgia, Virginia. The Georgia Department of Public Health confirmed it was monitoring 2 residents who had returned from the Hondius. Both were in good health, no symptoms. California confirmed monitoring of returning travelers, no indication of infection. But here is what the epidemiologists were watching more carefully than the confirmed cases: the incubation period, 1 to 6 weeks. A passenger who left the ship on April 24th and felt completely fine on May 8th could still develop symptoms by the end of May. The window was not closed. Elsewhere in the world, the contact tracing was revealing how far the exposure had already traveled. The flight from St. Helena to Johannesburg on April 25th, the flight on which the Dutch woman died, had carried passengers to multiple destinations. 8 French nationals on that same flight were now being tested. A flight attendant in Amsterdam, who had been on a subsequent flight with the deceased Dutch woman, was hospitalized with mild symptoms. She eventually tested negative, but the fact that she was on a different flight entirely from the one the woman had been on at the time of death illustrated exactly how far and how fast a virus can travel when people are moving across the world by plane. The WHO's Director General stood at a press conference and said clearly, "The risk to the global public is low. This is not a repeat of COVID. The Andes virus does not spread easily." And then he said something else. He said the situation was serious. He said more cases were expected to emerge. He said the investigation was ongoing. A ship left Argentina on April 1st, carrying 147 people who wanted to see the world. 3 of them are dead. The others are scattered across the globe, waiting to find out whether what they breathed on that ship is already inside them. This story is not finished. As of the day this video was made, the ship is still at sea. The investigation is still ongoing. The contact tracing is still unfolding. More cases may still emerge. What happened on the MV Hondius is a reminder of something that we tend to forget between outbreaks. The world is smaller than it looks. A man walks through a field in Argentina and breathes in a virus that has lived in the local rodent population for thousands of years. 18 days later, he boards a ship with 146 other people. 3 months after that, health officials in 12 countries are trying to find everyone he sat near. The wilderness is never as far away as we think, and the things that live in it travel further than we expect. Stay safe out there, and I'll see you in the next one.